Retire the colors.
Shall we bow? Lord, my, how we need your help today as we seek to say goodbye to our friends, General Joe and Sue Brown. Lord, this is one of those times that has taken us so totally by surprise and stunned us and shocked us to our core. Our understanding has failed us as these two who loved so deeply and lived so beautifully have left us so suddenly and so unexpectedly. We do thank you for all of the ways that their love and their passion for life touched us and encouraged us and made us feel special and alive too. And we ask, Lord, that as we celebrate their lives and acknowledge our loss in their leaving, that you will bring the comfort and healing that only you can bring to us, but most especially to Dan and Emily, and the extended Brown and Stanger families, and to all who knew and loved General Joe and Sue Brown. I ask these things in your most holy and majestic name, which is above all others, and in which I am so very honored to pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
A reading from the book of Isaiah. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Chaplain. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Major General Greg Martin, we extend a warm welcome to you all, and thank you for taking time today to honor our friends, Major General Joe Brown and his bride, Sue. We would like to extend a special welcome to our many distinguished guests, including the Honorable Michael Donnelly, Secretary of the Air Force, and his spouse, Gail, General Mark Welsh, the Air Force Chief of Staff, and his spouse, Betty, General Frank Grass, Chief, National Guard Bureau, Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Jim Cody, and his spouse, Athena, other distinguished flag and general officers, ambassadors, and senior officials. We want to extend a very warm welcome to all the members of the Brown and Stanger families, especially Sue's mom and dad, Craig and Martha Stanger, Sue's brother Scott Stanger and his spouse Tricia, General Brown's dad, Dr. Joseph D. Brown III, Colonel, United States Air Force, retired, General Brown's brother Ben Brown and his spouse Miko, General Brown's sister Barbara Bonner and her spouse Ron, General and Mrs. Brown's son, First Lieutenant Dan Brown and his spouse Emily, and hardly last, General and Mrs. Brown's daughter, Miss Emily Brown. Welcome to all. It is now my privilege to introduce the 14th President of the National Defense University, Major General Greg Martin.
Good morning. Welcome to NDU, and thank you for coming to honor two people who are absolutely our best and brightest. It's with heavy hearts that we gather to celebrate the lives of Joe and Sue Brown, particularly here on this campus where they embodied all that is right with this university and all that is right about those who serve and lead in our military. Speaking for all of Fort McNair and NDU, Maggie and I are so very thankful that we got to be neighbors, colleagues, and friends with such wonderful people. They were deeply admired, respected, and loved by all of us. Our friendship began 2 years ago when coaches Joe and Sue Brown led their legion of then ICAF Tigers up to Carlisle Barracks to compete, celebrate, and revel in the camaraderie of the Jim Thorpe sports competition. And yes, he wanted to win. Over the next 48 hours of fellowship and fun on the fields of friendly strife, Maggie and I quickly understood that these were two amazing people, and we were getting to know one very special couple. Over the ensuing 24 months, I discovered that Joe was truly a force of nature, an officer of rock-solid character, the consummate professional, with an insatiable intellectual appetite, indeed, a ferociously hungry, lifelong learner. He was a leader of the highest caliber. His courage and loyalty, humility and compassion were truly exceptional. His insights, his ideas, will continue to guide this university and the national security leaders we educate, develop, and inspire for years to come. Joe has built strategic leaders of wisdom, character, and strength. He has passed the torch. Joe was the perfect choice to lead an institution with the national and international prominence of the Eisenhower School. He took the stick at a time of great upheaval and challenge, provided wisdom and passion, and helped elevate all of NDU to a higher level, earning the respect and fidelity of people across this university and throughout the national and international security communities. Joe made all of us better. He was a determined advocate for our people and our programs. He was an energetic and optimistic force who believed in building bridges, not walls. He epitomized the fundamental approach of NDU, forging new partnerships and strengthening existing ones at the person-to-person and family-to-family levels. When we listen to each other, learn from each other, leverage the strengths of each other, we are smarter, stronger, and better together. Joe was a warrior, a patriot, an airman, never backing down from the righteous fight and never deviating from a life of integrity, selfless service, and excellence. He was also a man in all that is good in that word, a devoted husband, a loving father, and honored son. And throughout, what grounded, guided, and powered him were his faith, his family, his friends. Joe and Sue have left a powerful and positive legacy at this institution. We are thankful for the time we were given with them. To say that they will be missed does not begin to give meaning to what their lives really represented. As Susan Eisenhower wrote so eloquently, with humility and purpose, they made a commitment to clear the way so that others could be first, to enjoy peace, freedom, and our days without worry. Sue and Joe regularly opened their home to all of us. They were encouragers and teachers who were devoted to their family. And that family extended to every single member of NDU, as well as their Fort McNair and church communities. Joe and Sue Brown were simply the epitome of Air Force style, professionalism, and grace. Full of goodness and love, there were none better. They always had a ready smile and easy laugh. They sang and danced. They lived life to the fullest. They were fun, overflowing with joy. Whatever Joe and Sue did, they did it with all their hearts. They made their lives count. Big. Through their example, they showed us what right looks like. They are and will be greatly missed. Joe and Sue, we will see you on the high ground.
Thank you, sir. It's my honor now to introduce General Mark A. Welsh III, the Air Force Chief of Staff.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for letting us be here. I think I can speak on behalf of Secretary Donnelly and Gail and my wife Betty when I tell everybody in this room that if you're the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force or you're the Secretary of the United States Air Force, you want them representing you. It's a great picture, isn't it? This is what they look like all the time. Everybody will remark on that. Sue was always smiling. Joe was always interested. Fantastic couple. First, on behalf of all the men and women of the United States Air Force, on behalf of all of the men and women in this auditorium, to the Brown and Stanger family members, we are all so very, very sorry for your loss. We can't possibly comprehend what you're going through right now, but we want you to know that we miss them too. And we also want you to know that we wish we could shoulder some of your pain and take some of that terrible burden off of you. But we know that's not how it works. So the goal today is just to wrap our arms around you and make sure you know you're not alone in this. On behalf of everyone else in this audience, I need to say thank you to you as well for sharing your son and daughter, your mom and dad, your brother, your sister with our Air Force and with the great joint team that we're so proud to be a part of, and especially for sharing them with so many of us who are privileged to call him friend. Dr. Brown, you and Kay raised a patriot, a warrior, a great Virginia gentleman who happened to have a gift for leading other people, and he exercised it well. Mr. and Mrs. Stanger, you raised a beautiful daughter with a servant heart, a leader in her own right, and a true Southern lady. And Dan and Emily, you were blessed to grow up in a household surrounded by love. And one of the things I'd like you to take away from today is to look around this auditorium and understand that you're still surrounded by it. That hasn't changed, and it won't change. Sitting in this room are people who admired, respected, led, followed, and loved your parents. They're here today because your parents made a difference in all the ways that really matter in life. They welcomed friendship, and they honored it. They inspired trust and respect. They offered help willingly and gave it freely. They cared deeply about others. That's why we're here. And they loved each other. And they showed it easily. And maybe there's nothing we can respect more than that. And they loved you. And I believe they remain intensely proud of you. All of us are here today because we want to be here. We're here because Joe and Sue deserved it. And we're here because we want to be absolutely sure that you know that all of us think your parents were very, very special people. And we want the parents to know that we think your son and your daughter were very, very special people. You know, in the profession of arms, we value things that set people apart, things that make other people want to follow you. And for Major General Joe Brown, those things came pretty naturally. He was a great pilot. He was a great flight lead, a great instructor pilot, a great flight examiner, a great mission commander. He was a spectacular unit commander at every operational level of our Air Force. He led airmen in combat, and he brought them all home. He earned a Distinguished Flying Cross for valor in the skies over Iraq in 2003. He was a distinguished graduate of that other school next door. My alma mater, by the way. And of course, here he was a popular, charismatic commandant at the Eisenhower School. He was intensely proud of who he was, of the people he led, and of the nation he represented so well. And he was respected and admired by everyone who ever served with him. Everyone who I've ever heard of who ever served with him felt the same way. And in the end, we can give no greater compliment. Joe and Sue were best friends. They were real, genuine people. They were often seen sitting outside their house, holding hands, enjoying the beautiful view over the Washington Channel. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary last year, and were looking forward to retiring soon and starting their next great adventure together. And somehow, while it's unbearably painful to lose them both, I believe there's at least a thread of comfort in knowing that they're still side by side, holding hands, and starting out on their next and greatest adventure together. There is absolutely no way to predict a tragedy like this. There's no way to prepare for it, and there's no way to understand it. We're just not capable. But what we can do is remember the pride we felt in knowing Joe and Sue Brown. We can try to recreate the joy with which they embraced life, and we can celebrate the remarkable way they lived it. That's what today is all about. Almost exactly 100 years ago, a British poet named Lawrence Benyon wrote a poem called For the Fallen. And a verse in that poem has been used to memorialize fallen military members ever since. You'll recognize the words. They shall not grow old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. I promise.
Thank you, sir. Please welcome Sue's friend and fellow military spouse, Ms. Rachel Wheeler.
I'm one of those fortunate people that crossed paths with Sue because of our husband's career in the Air Force. We all have personal memories of Sue, but what I have before me here is a collaboration of heartfelt memories from some of Sue's closest friends, and many of you are sitting out there today. These are friends from past assignments, friends that vacationed with the Browns, family friends that got to watch Dan and Emily grow a little taller each year and become the beautiful adults that they are and that Sue and Joe were so deeply proud of. You'll see that there's a common theme, and some of them have already been mentioned here when I read this, or if you've read any other posts or blogs about Sue and Joe. First is that winning smile, that famous smile of Sue Brown. It was basically a straight path to her warm and welcoming heart, and you'll see that she's quite famous for that beautiful smile. Next is Sue's selfless giving to her family, to her church, and to the Air Force family. Another thing you're going to hear a lot about is about the way Sue and Joe danced together. It's referred to a lot. And if you've ever been at a function with them before and they're dancing, Sue looked so incredibly beautiful. And it looked as if she was almost dancing on air and left many of us wondering why our husbands can't dance like that. You'll see how so many of her friends enjoyed and appreciated the beautiful presence that Sue was. These are their words, written by Julie Kowalski, given to me, and it's with honor and privilege that I read them to you today. Sue Stanger Brown, her warm and radiant smile, her bright smile and welcoming spirit, her sweet, beautiful smile, full of radiance and light, her incredible smile. All these descriptions were written in heartfelt words by countless people that she knew. At the heart of that is the advice that Sue used to give many of us: always wear a smile. It always helps to be wearing something, especially when you're targeted by a group of enthusiastic first lieutenants that decide to no-notice roof stomp you in the middle of the night. Wear a smile. There isn't a person in this room who doesn't picture Sue without seeing her smile. It's what defines everything we know and love about her. Her smile was at the heart of all that she did, and all that she did was truly amazing. She was a devoted daughter, a loving wife, a fiercely dedicated mother, an accomplished cellist, a gourmet chef, a hostess extraordinaire, and a dedicated volunteer. She was a faithful member of her church and a true-blood Virginian. She was the epitome of an Air Force spouse. While all these things describe what Sue did, they don't define her. What defined her was her radiance, her full-of-life presence. No dinner party was too large, no volunteer job too difficult for her to tackle because of her take-charge attitude, her leadership, imbibed with graciousness and a sense of fun. Sue enjoyed who she was and where she was, even if it meant shoving errant clothes into a closet to give a no-notice house tour as she simultaneously broke out a chunk of Costco cheese, Chex Mix, and opened a bottle of wine, all for the hospitality check. Everyone who entered into Sue's home or life was treated with her complete engagement, making them feel as though they were the most important people in her life at that time and moment, and that's because they were. Her zest of life was apparent, whether it was defiantly defending the gates of Ellsworth Air Force Base against protesters, chasing George Clooney down for an autograph in Omaha. I was there. And no, we didn't get the autograph. Or joining in with the boys by unexpectedly and mischievously lighting up a cigar during a recent trip to Oregon. I was not there. Sue was all in all about being in the moment. And how can we talk about Sue without making it about Sue and Joe? Their love for each other was legendary, and Sue's enjoyment of life was only complete as part of a couple. Their parties were epic because of their enjoyment of each other. One does not dance alone, and dance they did. They danced together, they laughed together, entertained together, served together, and now they've entered heaven together. One friend shared that early on in Joe's career, they were invited to an event at a senior-ranking official's home. Being the ever-aware of social conventions type of people that they were, they RSVP'd as requested, and much to their great relief, because upon arrival, there was a sign at the door that listed the people who had responded to the invitation and that were welcome to enter the home. The note went on to say that if you hadn't prepared for the event by taking time to RSVP, then they were sorry they could not accommodate you that evening. Go home. Sue and Joe lived life prepared. As we struggled with our loss, I have no doubt that although we feel they arrived too early for their reservation at the great feast, their RSVP was entered long ago via the way they lived their lives. They touched countless people along the way as mentors and friends, always starting with those smiles. They were admired for their successes, but never forgot to treat others along the way, just like they always would, just because of who they were. They loved their family and their God deeply. And they'll be waiting as consummate host and hostess with those great big smiles to welcome us when it's our time, as long as we too have taken heart the lesson they have shared with us. One friend said that Sue was the woman who loved deeply and served her family and her God and every organization she joined with, the fullness of life, enthusiastic creativity. I will also add that she enjoyed life each and every day. One of her last comments on Facebook, and I was a Facebook friend, "Not a day goes by that I'm not thankful for the blessing of living in this special place." And she loved to share it, was evident by the many meals she and Joe prepared and shared with people in their home at Fort McNair, followed by cocktails out in the back as the sunset set over the Potomac. I propose to each of you that we must do the same to honor her and Joe. Collectively, we have cried an ocean of tears, but when the time comes and those tears come less and less and don't surface quite frequently, we are tasked to live our lives fully, to toast Joe and Sue with our favorite cocktails in true Brown fashion, to enjoy the sunset in our own little corners of the world. They'll be smiling down at us at those very moments, urging us to love, to laugh, and enjoy the days, today and tomorrow, for as long as we have them. But most of all, they'll be urging us to dance.
Many thanks, Ms. Wheeler. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce a dear friend of the Browns and Stangers, Major General Mike Carey, Commander, 20th Air Force, Francis E. Warren Air Force Base, Wyoming.
Well, you've heard this morning about Joe and Sue Brown and how they've positively affected so many people in so many different ways. I'm honored to share with you today the person, my brother in arms and my friend, Joe Brown. When we first met at Syracuse University for a short course, frankly, we did not hit it off. Joe was congenial and gregarious enough, but Joe believed he knew everything, and he acted like he knew everything. I unfortunately thought I knew everything as well, so for the duration of the course, we kept a congenial distance. But shortly after Joe and Sue joined us at Offutt Air Force Base on General's Row, the Syracuse tensions laid the groundwork for what was many a night of cigars, scotch. The two airmen luminaries debated, discussed, and frankly, solved all of the Air Force's problems, but merely half of the world's. We fell into a friendship that grew stronger and closer to a point that their daughter, Emily, was absolutely convinced that we were deeply involved in a bromance. Emily, you were right. I love your father. But that didn't change my view of his knowing everything. See, Joe had an operating philosophy: be correct most of the time and confident all of the time. Not a bad modus operandi. His laughter and smile was infectious, as was Sue's, as you've heard about and experienced likely. There were no dull or boring moments when we got together with the Browns. There was the fire pits, the barbecue, the holidays, because the kids were in town, formals, dinner parties, and yet, yes, one even replicating the Titanic's final dinner. And in case you were wondering, it was the first class dinner, not steerage class. General Kevin Chilton remarked that the neighborhood was a little quieter after both the Browns and Careys left, and a hell of a lot safer, too. Joe's a fixer. Joe fixed his Spitfire. Joe fixed my brakes. He fashioned a brake line, actually. But he also fixed my trailer lights in a sweltering August heat as I was attempting to move my sailboat from Nebraska to Virginia. The boat never made it. Had nothing to do with the trailer lights, but more to do with 600 pounds of Melody's plants changing the center of gravity of the boat. Had I thought to consult Joe Brown in advance, he would have calculated the right balance and fixed that too. Joe and Sue had a sophisticated balance in their lives. Joe kept a journal for years, decades. He read voraciously, as did Sue. They were intellectually and physically engaged in life. The Browns could hold a discussion with anyone, an ambassador, a diplomat, a general, the Rotary Club, and children. Sue was the cellist and Joe the singer. Although more of a crooner, Joe balanced Sue's classic cello rendition of Ave Maria with his version of You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'. It was one of our favorites. We sang it many times, as we did Danny Boy. Now, don't think for a moment that Sue didn't have a variety of music tastes, too. If you listen to their iPods, guess who had Celine Dion? Well, the debate still goes on, but Sue had a Lady Gaga ringtone, so we're thinking Joe had Celine Dion. Joe and Sue were a team in everything: dancing, traveling, skiing, hiking, official and unofficial social and charitable events, and they were active in all aspects of life. I particularly enjoyed their happy hour. It was a martini for Sue and a Manhattan for Joe. And he made them exquisitely. A connoisseur of fine tobacco, food, and wine made him the perfect complement to Sue's gourmet culinary skill. Joe, however, was a meat man. This past New Year's Eve, we vacationed together in Colorado, nice house in the mountains, skiing and all that. And Joe was out grilling tenderloin. Now, my wife, Melody, suggested that perhaps the steaks might be put back on the grill for just another moment. Behind Joe in the kitchen is Sue and Emily, eyes wide open, going, no! Apparently, Melody had committed some egregious sacrilege by suggesting that perhaps the meat wasn't done perfectly. After a smirk and a look from Joe, it was decided that the steaks indeed were cooked properly. Joe and Sue are Christians, patriots, charitable, learned, adventurous, a great many things. But first and foremost, they are Virginians. Both Daniel and Emily were born on Air Force bases in Texas, and to many that would make them Texans, God forbid. Upon their delivery, Joe revealed a Ziploc bag filled with dirt and proudly stated, to the nurse's horror, my children's feet will first touch Virginia soil. And indeed they did, as he jammed their little newborn feet into the plastic bag. An honorable man, he taught his children right from wrong. He taught his airmen right from wrong. And he lived his life rightly. Sue and Joe were complementary souls, a match made in heaven, solidified after a second date, and celebrated through over 30 years of marriage. They raised their children, prayed with their children, and led by example how to live life. If you'd been in Williamsburg last Friday, when Daniel and Emily spoke before the congregation of family and friends, you'd have seen the manifestation of good upbringing. Although most were tearful, I, for one, was uplifted and filled with pride. I was amazed at the strength and composure that they demonstrated. Joe and Sue were certainly proud, too. They know their children will lead fruitful and productive lives, happy lives. These are children of loving, faithful parents who took the time to teach them to dance, to sing, to cook, entertain, think, challenge the world, and be disciplined in their lives. Daniel and Emily are prepared for the road ahead, and no wonder they learned at the knee of Joe and Sue. I regret not knowing Joe years before the bromance started. Had I known sooner, the man I came to embrace, the gentleman, the officer, the friend, I'd be much richer today. To know Joe and Sue Brown, you didn't have to spend a lot of time with them, though. For those of you who had visited their quarters, you know it's filled with fine items reflecting a cultured and welcoming home. There's a patio for barbecue with friends, 2 Adirondack chairs out back for the sunsets. There's antiques from the Civil War, from Belgium, fine china, a wonderfully equipped kitchen, and a well-stocked bar. The good wine's in the basement. Upstairs is a Civil War rifle, his saber from VMI, and artifacts reflecting his family genealogy. The other day after Joe and Sue passed, Daniel and I were toasting his parents with what else but a Manhattan and the obligatory cigar, when I learned we're actually related by a blood relationship from nearly 400 years ago, starting with Pocahontas. That makes our friendship what it really was, what it really is, a kinship. You don't have to spend a lot of time with the Browns to know them, but you'd be better off if you had. Melody and I are richly blessed to have them as our dear close friends. Joe is many things to me, a fellow airman, a fellow patriot, apparently a cousin. But most importantly, my friend. I like to think of myself as Joe Brown's best friend. Actually, Sue Brown is his very best friend.
Thank you, sir. General and Mrs. Brown led lives of selfless service to their family, to their community, to their Air Force, and to their country. General Welsh will now present 2 awards to formally recognize that service. Receiving the award for Sue will be her mom and dad, Martha and Craig Stanger, and for General Brown, his dad, Dr. Dan Brown. Will the guests please rise? The Secretary of the Air Force proudly presents the Commander's Public Service Award to Mrs. Sue Stanger Brown for exceptionally distinguished service to the United States Air Force and the National Defense University as the spouse of the Commandant of the Dwight D. Eisenhower School for National Security and Resource Strategy, and as a role model for military spouses throughout the Browns' long and storied career. Every day of their life together, Mrs. Brown tirelessly supported her husband, the United States Air Force, military families, and the nation. Sue Brown's devotion to her husband and their family through the long hours of arduous and hazardous duty, numerous peacetime and combat deployments, and 16 geographic assignments directly enabled General Brown to successfully execute his duties of significant national importance. At each level of his command, Sue was a driving force to increase the quality of life for Air Force airmen and their families. As president of the Air Force Officers' Wives Club of Washington, Sue Brown was the key to the club's unprecedented success in supporting philanthropic efforts, including the Air Force Charity Ball, the Bowling Thrift Shop, and the College Scholarship Fund, raising more than $775,000 to directly support service members worldwide. In addition, as an ardent supporter of the National Defense University's International Fellows Program, Sue was an impressive ambassador to international colleagues. Her outreach built lasting friendships between countries by welcoming hundreds of international fellows and their families, and by helping them understand and experience American culture. The exemplary leadership and selfless devotion to duty displayed by Mrs. Sue Brown reflect the highest credit upon herself, her family, and the United States Air Force. Attention to orders. The Secretary of the Air Force proudly presents the Air Force Distinguished Service Medal to Major General Joseph D. Brown IV, United States Air Force, for exceptionally distinguished service as Commandant of the Dwight D. Eisenhower School for National Security and Resource Strategy from October 2010 to April 2013. Major General Brown's visionary leadership, academic acumen, and infectious enthusiasm for the students, faculty, and mission of the Eisenhower School directly contributed to the national security of the United States by superbly preparing senior U.S. and foreign military officers, civilians, and industry executives for strategic leadership positions throughout the government, allied militaries, and private industry. General Brown's deep commitment to ensuring that the next generation of senior leaders gain the knowledge and skills needed to meet the security strategy challenges of the 21st century drove his ceaseless efforts to enhance professional military education, focusing on the key pillars of leader development, national security strategy, and the critical role of resourcing in achieving the nation's security objectives. The consummate professional in every respect, Major General Joe Brown leaves a legacy of excellence, intellectual rigor, collegiality, and innovation that have secured the long-term future of the Eisenhower School and the National Defense University. As a proven warrior and unparalleled leader, General Brown has truly left his mark on this institution, every member of the university community, and the Air Force. In the dedication of his service to his country and through his distinctive accomplishments, General Joe Brown reflected great credit upon himself, the United States Air Force, and the Department of Defense. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the benediction.
Shall we bow? Lord, thank you for being here with us today and for helping us in this very difficult but vital process of honoring and saying goodbye to our friends. Please help us to remember that you are always with us, no matter what, and that you care about every part of our lives and will help us, especially when we look to you and trust you. Please help us to do just that again today and in all the days that lie ahead. Amen.
The National Defense University and Joe and Sue's family thank you all for attending today's memorial honoring lives well lived, and extend deepest appreciation for your thoughts and prayers. You are all invited to share light refreshments in the South Atrium reception area to the other end of the building, and to greet members of the Brown and Stanger families who will be in the atrium in a few minutes. Please feel free to remain here in the auditorium as long as you like, to enjoy the Air Force strings and images of Joe and Sue. This concludes today's service.